Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this last session for today. So we are doing the forum, and I think some of you who are coming to our conferences often know what the forum is about. Um, who doesn't know what the forum is? Wow, okay. You might have heard me introduce it yesterday, but the forum is an open discussion among you. And we, at every place we hold a conference, we use the place and the space to inform the forum's topic. So because we are in Hawaii, as Dr. Hattori mentioned, the most pressing issue in Hawaii and in the Pacific Islands is climate change. Therefore, this forum discussion will be on global citizenship and the environment, engagement, and action. So how many here believe that climate change is a big issue? Okay. No shame. How many of you believe that climate change is a hoax? No, nobody.
I told you wouldn't get a single person.
Are you shy or do you feel peer group pressure?
Hold on a second. You need the microphone.
I don't think that climate change is a hoax, but I think that the political agenda behind changing what's happening with the climate is there's a good focus. And I think that there are other pathways than some of the ones that we are unsuccessfully pursuing.
So the question here is, and I think a lot of the discussion will center around this, are you willing to contribute knowing this fact?
Already am.
Okay. Are you willing to continue though?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody know who the number one institution is in terms of pollution? Who is the biggest polluter?
I know.
Anyone shout it? The U.S. military.
The U.S.
That
military.
is correct.
Do we have a prize for him?
For those of us who didn't know that, how do we know that?
Excellent point. Excellent point, and I will mention it now. So
Before, if you want to say something, please do wait for the mic because no one will hear a word you're saying unless you're in a microphone. Okay.
So the military accounts for 5.5% of global emissions, as opposed to civil aviation, that contributes to 2%. So a valid question is, by many, why should I care? I'm just a civilian when institutions are bigger polluters than me, right? The US Army has 750 overseas bases, or 3/4 of the world's military presence. That makes it the biggest polluter on the planet. Now, how do we know it? We don't know it. And the reason is because the military is the institution, not just the US military, but militaries around the world, are the only institutions that are not being held accountable at places as the COP, for example, or UN, the Paris Agreement, or any international cooperation meetings. So the military is not does not have to report on their activities. And because the military does not report, there is no evidence that it is the biggest polluter. Now, of course, there are vested interests behind it, and that's why it is not held accountable at these meetings. So I know none of you believe that climate change is a hoax, but there's a lot of people who believe that, and it is on the rise, and especially in the US. What are some reasons for denial? There are different types of denial. So some people believe that climate change is a lie, is a comfortable lie, an inconvenient truth. So they don't want to change their everyday behavior because, well, it's easier to believe that I can drink from plastic straws or I can use my car to go somewhere instead of changing that. Of course, connected to that is the economic denial, right? The cost is too high. I don't want to pay that price, so I prefer to use my car. I prefer to have the air condition on all night. Then some believe in the lack of scientific certainty. So because scientists cannot agree on specific data, it means that the data must be a lie. So they don't believe in science. And then, of course, there's the political denial, inaction influenced by others' inaction. So if developed countries are not acting, why should developing countries act? Factors contributing to denial: the manipulation of public opinion by religious, political, institution leaders, the public's susceptibility to disinformation, anecdotal evidence taking precedence over scientific knowledge, and the distrusting of public institutions. So when we discuss today, you might want to touch upon these things, depending on whether that's what your research is about or whether you have opinions on that. But the main issue here is that raising awareness might not be enough to compel people to action. So having this in mind, the theme of this forum is, or answers, hopefully, questions around how and with what tools can we reverse the impact of psychological manipulation and disinformation on the collective mind? How can we get people to care about climate change? How can we compel people to act despite the comfortability of inaction? And what leaders do we need to strengthen accountability? If you come up with any other questions, we can discuss them.
Melina, before we begin, if there are questions in between, how do we go about addressing them? I see a lot of hands up throughout.
Well, we have a lot of questions, I think, coming up. So if we address all the questions now, we don't have time to finish.
So yeah, there'll be a lot of chance for you to discuss some of these things coming up.
So this was just a small introduction and some food for thought. We also published an article before the forum. I don't know how many of you have read it, but there's a lot of detailed information about the military's operation, about how other countries address climate change, and what the US military's impact is in Hawaii specifically. We published that on the IAFOR's website, so if you're interested, you can read that. There's also references that you can read later. But before we continue, because we usually do that during the introductory speech of the conference, our CEO usually does that, but he didn't have too much time today. So we're going to do it here. We're going to have some icebreaker questions so that you can get to know each other and speak to each other. And we prepared two hopefully interesting questions for you. And you can choose either one. You don't have to answer both. But I want you to stand up, go to someone of a different nationality, a different culture, who speaks a different language than you, and discuss these two questions. What are your passions or hobbies, and why do you care about them? What makes you get up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to go scuba diving, or I'm going to go to the store because I'm a stamp collector and I want to collect the latest stamp, for example. And the other is, what is a conspiracy theory you believe in and why? Okay, so you have about 5 minutes. Stand up. Go talk to your neighbors.
Yep, this works best if you're in groups of people you don't know and haven't spoken to before. So please stand up and talk to somebody else.
Okay, and I think that aloha was your cue. So
Thank you.
I'm introducing, of course, Mike Menchaca from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and he will be a co-moderator today. I think he has a lot of experience of what is happening in Hawaii in particular. You've been living in Hawaii for
21 years.
21 years. Okay. So yeah, I'm handing over to Mike, who is going to ask
Thank
you
you.
to
Yeah, so
share.
basically you heard a lot from us and you've talked to each other, so we want to hear more from you. So basically, if any of the groups would like to share what you learned about what motivates people, what they like to do, just kind of various, we're just interested to know what are the things that people are interested in. Or if you want to share your conspiracy theory, I'll share mine. I do believe that probably over some time in the millennia, aliens have come to visit Earth, right?
I'm with you on the aliens, Mike.
It seems unlikely that they haven't, but obviously I don't have any firm evidence that to be. So that's the conspiracy theory that I might tend to believe.
We got a hand up at the back. Okay.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so Matthew will, yeah, because we do have people on the internet as well, and we're very cognizant that they should be as much included. So do wait for the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew and Michael. We both, Yoko and myself, Elaine, we both love travel. Obviously, we're here. And the passion for that comes with the idea of also while you travel, you learn. And so that was our response to number one and why we care.
Thank you. Travel's a good one.
Anyone else?
Probably most of you are here because you enjoy travel. I'm here because I answered an ad for a job and I thought, well, at the very least, I'll get a free trip for an interview, and 21 years later.
We were talking about processing, how we actually know what we know. And I just brought up a secret sort of possibility that not big pharma being the problem, but big health being the problem. Big health being, pushing people and preying on people's vulnerabilities and basically ignorance and maybe intellectual laziness in order to sell them things like vitamins and all the alternative health type stuff. And we know it's a huge industry, things that are supposedly going to make things good for you, but not. So there you go. That's a conspiracy theory that I think about whether it's true or not.
It could be self-serving. Absolutely. Very good point. Thank you.
Anyone else? Only two people?
I know there's one.
Oh, there's one more. Yes. Okay.
There we go.
Hi, so we were chatting, and whilst our passions are quite different, in some ways, what connected it was the sense of the emotion. And I was reflecting on the AI stuff and the digital stuff. So it's really important to feel connected with oneself. And for my passion, feeling connected in society, particularly around the discussions that we've had today. So you like the idea of feeling free and riding the bike, didn't you? Yeah. I'm sharing stories. But yeah, for me, my passion, connecting with people and trying to make a difference through design. I think that's it, isn't it, really? Do you want to add anything?
She asked me about my passion. So my passion, it look different from my main job. I'm supervisor education, but my passion is motorcycle, the big one, like 650 cc like this. So I'm just looking for someone who different from the main job. Sometimes we so straight with the job and want to like fly on the road like this. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so shall we move?
Sure. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
Okay, so for this, we're entering the meat of the discussion. If you scan this QR code with your phones, you will be able to participate in these polls and questions and send in your answers directly.
And if you can't get the QR code to function, you can go to slido.com and enter the number. And if it doesn't work, don't panic.
Okay, somebody already. Woo, okay. The question is, are you willing to pay more for climate change, either as taxes or higher consumer prices?
Pretty stable. Ooh. Oh, it depends. Came from behind. Yeah. I don't know. It's different when it's in theory and then when you're in the store and the two prices are sitting you in the face, right? Like, okay, well, that one's Echo and it's $5.99 and that one is $3.99. Ooh, okay. That makes it a lot harder. Great. So it looks pretty stable now, but overall, people are more having a propensity to say that they would, and a nice, honest number there, about a fifth of us that say, no, I'm going to pay for the prices. And that may be motivated by economics and what you can afford as well, right? So very, very interesting answers to that. Thank you.
So maybe you can share why you chose no and why you chose it depends. What does it depend on?
Yeah, anybody willing to go?
Like anything related to cost, it depends on how much more. So I'm okay to put some extra, but if you ask 10 times more the price, then yeah, my decision may be different. So it mostly depends on the amount of the effort.
Very good answer. Just like in the US, we like to say people vote their pocketbook.
I said no, because one, I literally cannot afford to. And two, I have a belief, and this could be part of a conspiracy theory, that the replacement population levels of these high-level contributors to the climate change is going to drop dramatically in the next 20 and 30 years, that some of these things are going to resolve themselves by the very fact that economies are going to collapse.
Where am I going?
I gotta take the mic to the.
Oh, okay. So go ahead. I actually say it depends, because are the taxes really, if you put the money into the tax, will the money actually go to climate change initiatives, or will it go to paying an expense account of a politician? And same goes for the higher consumer prices. And I'm just thinking about, when we put money into an initiative, does it end up there? And if we look at, say, the aid, even if it's food aid, for example, going to certain countries, it doesn't make it to the countries. It makes it into the pocket, if there's corruption involved, it goes into the pockets of those in charge. So that's where I was a bit more, I would answer, it depends. Yeah.
Kind of like, where do our donations go sometimes? Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so my answer also it depends. First of all, climate change is an externality to some benefits that some society have enjoyed long time. And so development involves cost and benefit. And so if, of course, I have a reason to believe that I enjoy more of the outcome of what led to the climate change, I'll be willing to pay. But if I do believe, and statistically proven, that I didn't enjoy the benefits much, then of course I will not be willing to pay. Those who contribute more should rather be willing to pay more. That from a solid economic theoretical background.
Thank you. Well put. Behind? Do you have your hand?
So I don't have an actual answer to your question because I think the first piece is the question of privilege. And I think that's what we need to think about because the question really speaks to who has privilege to make these types of choices. And if you have the privilege, you probably have the economic power, as the gentleman before me mentioned, and that would make a difference in how you would respond. So I think we really have to talk about how privilege operates in our society. And with that privilege, what power comes.
No, that's well said, because if the difference is $2 for one person, that difference might be huge. And for another person with privilege, it might be minuscule.
One more here.
Yeah, more here, and then we'll end with.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Michael from University of Tsukuba, Japan. In response to this question, I would say from a personal perspective, as a consumer of agricultural produce, I would say that, as we consume products, we emit some carbon and other elements that result into climate change effects. And so if I go to a convenience shop or I go to the market to purchase an item, and this item has been priced or taxed, like climate change component has gone into the tax, I will be willing to pay because as a researcher, I understand the fact that climate change is affecting agricultural productivity. And so when I consume, I know probably this percentage of carbon could be emitted from this agricultural product. And so I am willing to pay on this level as an individual consumption of agricultural products level. Thank you.
Well said. And actually, I'd like to bring up a point about that because I think in general, and probably rightfully so, the United States gets beat up for its production, but yet some states have differentiation by taxing. If you look at gas prices, you can see gas in California at $5 and in Tennessee at $3. And part of that $2 actually does go towards climate change issues. So while there's privilege, there is some factors built into that to try and counter that privilege. But of course, it's not across the entire nation. So it's interesting that you'd be willing to do that.
And it is not, they are across the entire nation, as you have mentioned.
Correct.
But the climate change is a global problem. So ideal solution is to have a common carbon price all over the world. But actually, it is not impossible. So therefore, there could be one hand high carbon price for a certain area, and there could be very much low carbon price or no carbon price in certain areas. So that could cause carbon leakage from, say, high carbon price region to low carbon price regions, such as relocation of the production base. So in the end, the global emissions may not decrease or even increase because of the carbon leakage. So that is the most difficult part of these problems. And in order to address this problem partially, the European Union is currently considering carbon border tariff, carbon border adjustment measures to tax, to impose carbon tariff to the imported goods from such countries as China and India. But those countries are lashing against this sort of proposals, saying that this is a trade restriction under the name of climate change mitigation. So that could lead to trade war. So this is very, very difficult. So that is why I voted for it depends. You know, I'm ready to pay to some extent. But if, for example, Japan's carbon mitigation cost is too high compared with such country as China, then that could cause carbon leakage from Japan to China. Then that is not for the interest of Japan. So we need to, it depends, you know.
Right. Yeah, it depends. And then the other issue with the tariff is then it's not really becomes the responsibility of the country that the tariff is imposed. It's the consumers that end up paying that differentiation. So complex. Very, very well interesting. Thank you all for sharing on that.
A question from that, and also from the comment that the gentleman up there made before. Who should shoulder the cost of climate change action? We talk a lot about the taxpayer shouldering the cost. Is that really so?
Yeah. Any other opinions? We talked about tariffs, where it would be the consumer. We talked about taxes, which is also the consumer. Ken?
Hi, I'm Ken Hansen. One of the things that hasn't really been discussed yet, and it was Professor Arima's remarks that caused me to think about this, is that we're all paying for the disaster response. Whenever there's a climate-related disaster, those are costs that have to be covered. And wherever they happen, those costs are borne locally primarily or by, you know, the next level government up. And we've seen that in the US, and it's often indigenous communities that are adversely affected. But we've lost entire cities and towns in the US to catastrophic fires, including Lahaina. And so when we talk about the cost, we need to keep in mind that this isn't entirely a voluntary thing on our part. And, you know, also related back to the comment made about privilege. Some of us may have the privilege of voluntarily paying more, but we're all going to end up paying for the cost of the disasters that happen repeatedly because we refuse to do anything about this. So then it becomes a question of, well, what are you willing to pay for? You're going to have to pay for something. Do you want to keep paying $1 trillion a year in the US to maintain a military to try to keep the price of energy low? Or do you want to pay higher taxes to try and mitigate the problem and higher prices? Or do you want to pay for the disasters? But, you know, to a great extent, a lot of this is not voluntary. We're going to end up paying for it regardless.
I think that's a great question. I mean, a great comment, and that goes back to what Mary's presentation was as well, is that who's bearing the weight of these decisions. And you look at these Pacific nations, they're not volunteering to be in this situation, and yet they're some of the most adversely affected, not just economies, but individuals. And then you mentioned about taxing, tariffs, and disaster relief. Add on that to insurances. I live in Hawaii. The insurance that I had to pay for my unit went up 350%, not 50%. It went up so much that the whole entire building had to raise our monthly fees to cover the insurance, both individually and collectively. And there's some people in Lahaina trying to rebuild that can't afford any of this, right? So then who are they going to go to for assistance? So thank you. Other thoughts on that? Okay, one here. Okay, you're first.
Yeah.
And then in the back, and then in the front.
I'm Gloria Salting. I just wanted to say, both from an African perspective, although I'm also an American citizen, but as an African in particular, I think, Africans look at the consequences of climate change in Africa is devastating. So when it comes to who should pay for climate change, we would say definitely those in the North, Americans and China and all the others that are the culprits of this, the consequences and the damaging effects of climate change. And if you can see what consequences it has in South Africa, in Africa in particular, many of the people don't have actual homes and they have mud homes. And when the storms are lately becoming as devastating as they are here in the United States, it has worse consequences. People lose their homes. People are already struggling. Unemployment has consequences. As a result, people do not have actual work per se. Most of the uneducated people, and we can say much because we perhaps are educated and we can live in better spaces, but the majority of the people, unfortunately, there would be an uprise, of the consequences of climate change. It is really a serious issue and devastating, and it is damaging, people's very living.
That's interesting. I mean, in the thought of cooperation, one thing that Dr. Hattori was talking about was getting these Pacific nations together. Well, wouldn't it be stronger to have Pacific nations and African nations and South American nations? But it's a challenge. So you can take him in the back there, Mike. Yep. And then while you're doing that, you can go ahead here.
Oh, I was actually just going to pick up on the point that you made about insurance, and I actually do disaster research, like community response and resilience to disaster research with the Torrens Resilience Initiative in Flinders University, Australia, and look at all multi-disaster situations. And we actually have, probably with the insurance in Australia, that whole towns are now going, postcodes are just not going to be insured. End of story. There's no nuance. There's no nothing. And what the insurance companies are now doing is actually picking up on initiatives to help people prepare their houses. And the insurance companies are doing it, not the government's trying to do it, but now it's starting to come on board. So, and you think about climate change. We push in Australia. We get told that we have to drive less, we have to recycle, we have to do that. We, as the community, are not the polluters, okay? And yet we get guilted into thinking that we're the problem as individual households. The bigger problem actually is being diverted from, in Australia, it's agriculture is one of the biggest polluters. So it's these, there's a lot of misdirection in this debate about, you're pointing at this person here and blaming there, but it's been shifted around a lot. We're looking in the wrong places sometimes, I think. But, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I think this question is a full thesis if you have to answer everything. Now, in my view, we can clearly divide this question into kind of a legal question. It's also a social question, and it's also a question about ethics. If you look at it from ethical point of view, then of course, for example, we have intergenerational responsibility. For example, the current generation, for example, has responsibility of maintaining a climate system for the future generation to come. So that's a moral, a kind of moral aspect or ethical aspect. Then if we look at the Kyoto Protocol, it clearly stated the difference, like Annex A and Annex B. The principle was that equal but differentiated responsibility. So those who emit higher have responsibility of paying higher, okay? Or shouldering, if you have to use your word, and shouldering higher costs. And those who emit less should shoulder less of the cost. But in the end, it all has to do with the public policy. The government have to come in because it's only government who has the constitutional right to impose tax on whoever should pay for this. But I must mention that some of the cost is not about who should bear it. we had to bear some of the cost involuntarily. If there is drought, famine, there is a wildfire, these are also costs to society. For this one, we cannot make a choice whether we want to bear this cost or not. So already some of the costs of climate change, we're already bearing them disproportionately. So I'm wondering if the question is about monetary cost or other form of cost. If clearly you can distinguish between the costs, then we can make the argument straightforward. But in general term, already we are bearing some of the costs involuntarily. Thank you.
That's a very good point. And you brought up the issue of drought. And I lived in California before I came to Hawaii. And one of my dear friends is a farmer. And there, during drought periods in California, they didn't have to regulate their consumption of water, whereas everybody, it was on the backs of everyone else. And that was also an equity issue. But at the same time, you have to grow your crops for people. But who pays for that in a drought time, right? That those subsidies have to come to the farmers. So very interesting.
And we can make many points from this simple question. For example, she's saying that freeze prices, not the poor. So she's advocating the price regulation by the government, intervening into energy prices. But theoretically, it is not the right response to tackling with climate change, because if you intervene in energy prices, you will subsidize not only poor families, but also rich families as well. So rather than subsidizing energy prices, you should provide direct subsidy to the low-income families rather than intervening into energy prices. And then the completely different topic, but the how to say best utilize climate finance for mitigation and adaptation. This is another topic which we need to discuss, because mitigation it tends to be more expensive than adaptation finance. Because adaptation, you spend certain amount of money, then you can feel the benefit from that adaptation finance directly, because adaptation problem tends to be local. But mitigation is global problems. So even though you spend huge amount of money for cutting emissions, the total impact globally is very much minimal. So currently, about 70 or 80% of the total climate finance goes to mitigation rather than adaptation. But we need to rebalance the climate finance between mitigation and adaptation, because actually many developing countries, in particular vulnerable countries, are suffering from the ongoing impact of climate change. So therefore, in order to make use of, finite financial resources more efficiently, then adaptation should receive more attention. My final comment is, it is really, really difficult to attribute the various natural disaster to climate change. Looking into a sixth assessment report of the IPCC, they clearly say that there's a clear interrelation between anthropogenic activities, human activities, and the greenhouse gas emissions, and also rising global temperature. But with regard to the frequency of the heavy rain or drought, according to the sixth assessment report, scientific certainty is much, much lower compared with correlation between anthropogenic activity and higher temperature. So we are causing definitely higher temperature, but the scientific confidence that whether we are contributing to more frequent heavy rain or drought, that is questionable. So we need to be very much honest to various the correlation between natural disaster and our activities.
Okay. This is a bit of a different question now. I think we have a lot of educators in the room. The question is, can climate change action be taught? Can behavior, can mitigation be taught?
Great. So we have a nice spread there, about 70% at yes now, about 25 at maybe, and good 10-ish on no. So same question. Is anybody willing to share what they picked and why they picked what they picked regarding education and climate change?
Before you say yes, those who answered yes, because there's a question for you later. Those who answered maybe or no.
In the back. Run, Matthew, run. I've been waiting to say that.
Emily Zeller. I'm from the US. I said yes, but I should have said maybe. I think that practices can be taught, but practices come from beliefs, and beliefs come from ideologies. And at least in the US, we are encountering ideological differences as a society that are very difficult to break into. And if you couple that with what is allowed and what is not allowed in K-12 schooling, there are tremendous challenges with answering just yes to this question.
Yes, the days of taking the teacher at face value are long gone. Anyone else?
Who said no?
Yeah, who said no? I want to hear from the no's.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I got it, Matt.
I'm sorry, I'm very controversial, but I'm going to chuck a bit of a devil's advocate thing in here because I do work as part of this is in disinformation. Okay, it's information management. I know that we can't change the minds of people, we change the hearts of people. It's related to the answer given up there, that when you're teaching, can you teach climate change action, you might be able to try and present an argument, but we think that we're actually dealing with people's minds and rational choices, and we're dealing with a rational public. But when you look in the information space, we are not dealing with rational people. We are not rational. We like we like telling our own stories. We're the heroes of our own narratives. We live in little bubbles where we have people who are agreeing with us in social media. Algorithms push us to this. So if you present something that, is too hard, that you don't identify with, that don't feel emotionally good about, and you don't actually make people you aren't leading with emotion, what are you doing? And I'm not entirely sure when you say taught, how would you do that? Will you teach someone to feel different? I mean, that's not very successful, is it?
I'm also hearing that we're getting some comments online. So if there's anybody online watching this, can you turn on your microphone?
I'm another Australian who said no. I think it goes back to the same thing. I'd say it's the belief. You cannot teach somebody to believe on something. It's quite a challenging task to do that. So can you actually teach people in the understanding that climate change is actually happening? Maybe that's possible, but can you actually teach them to the climate change action? I think that's a pretty difficult task. At least in this generation, that will be quite difficult. With the generational change that earlier was presented by Professor Akiro, maybe I think we need a new generation for that to come when they will understand and they will start appreciating the climate. But as such, I don't think we can teach the climate change action.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I'm from South Africa. I think maybe the issue has taken over here. We need to really look at the belief aspect they are talking. You see, people can believe something because they do not have other alternative to look at the other side of it. You see, if you are brought up, life is made up of what? Nature and nurtured. How you are brought up, the environment in which you are brought up, You tend to believe whatever transpires over there. But as you move along from your environment to another place, you have alternative information. You will begin to renew your mind about what is happening in your society, whether to accept it or not. Let me go back to what is it? The colonialism. Africa, we knew God before the Christianity. But because the white brought the Christianity to us, we turn now to believe Christianity more than the traditional religion that has been believed, because they were teaching us. They were teaching the Christianity and hammering it. So with this, what can happen is the climate change can be taught to renew the mind of the people, that the traditional mind they have, the mindset can actually be changed from one place to another so that we have a better climate.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. In the way back there, Matthew.
And that's the last one.
Yeah, and then, okay, that will be the last, and then we'll go on to the next item. Yeah, we have about
Thank you very
5
much for
minutes
this
left.
opportunity. To add to that, I want to say it depends on our perceptions. So I want to link this to a specific context, like agriculture. If farmers understand the fact that their crops are being damaged as a result of floods and that of climate change, and when they see the damages that happens, the cost that they incur as a result of the damages, then it means therefore that when technical experts or extension officers or technical expertise are able to inform them about measures, so for instance, measures like your crop damage can be prevented by creating proper waterways. When there is heavy downpour, this water may not end up on your fields. Or if you can employ irrigation on your field, when it comes to drought, you'll be able to access water to apply to the crops to avoid drought damages. So when these technologies are there and are being employed to be able to assist yield and productivity, the result is more like a demonstration. The result is there for other farmers to see. And so this climate change action, like adopting irrigation, creating waterways, or any other drainage systems in order to prevent flood or drought damages, could encourage other farmers to perceive these actions to be positive actions in tackling crop damages and losses. So aside from this is the agricultural sector. We can also look at it from the industrial aspects or industrial areas. So from sector to sector, the climate change actions can be taught in order to mitigate the effects that comes with climate change from region to region. It doesn't matter who the source of the how do we call it, the emission, the high. We earlier mentioned that the higher emitter must pay, and the lower emitters must pay a certain amount. Others are of different opinions. So this very climate issue can be taught based on evidence. So, like I mentioned earlier, when there is indeed something, a damage existing that we are seeing, the perception about the mitigation measures will be different, as mentioned by the gentleman over there. So the perception is one of the aspects. It could also be changed when the technology is available, or this has been seen by everyone in all these sectors that I'm trying to cite as an example.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think June mentioned about the intervention of technology, and that's actually my particular area as well, not just technology, but also the manipulation of social media, which is a whole other discussion.
For the sake of time, I'm going to bypass those who said yes. We wanted you to share what you actually do in your classrooms to teach it. And I'm going to go to the last question. And just type in keywords. What would you ask the political leadership to consider regarding climate change?
Oh, I like the running count up there. 14 participants typing. There we go. All right, great answers are now coming in. Don't waste tax, education, rely on youth, impact of non-action, cost of disaster response, recognition.
Usually when we do this, there's a clear answer. There's a lot of yellow
Yeah.
here, which means that there's
That's
a lot
good.
of responses.
Yes.
Well, it's
It's
a broad
complicated.
question. Yeah, it's a broad question, but everyone has different priorities, I guess. So.
But education is one of the things that seems to be leading in the overall. Guillotine, I saw that one, half joking. I see act quite a bit in written in different ways. So that would one that would be come out as well. Teacher preparation, more education. And action comes up a few different ways as well. All right, I think we're at a little after 5. Lena, you want to close us out?
Probably. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss these keywords. But
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can discuss amongst yourself even after this session, and you can write us also. In fact, if you're feeling inspired and if you have a strong opinion about these issues, you can always contact me and contact us. And we can co-publish an article with IAFOR. We have different ways to do that. We can do that with journals that we collaborate with. We can do that with a THE, for example. So if you are really passionate about this topic, please contact us. And thank you for participating in this session.